That's B-roll.
Okay, it's ready whenever you are.
Okay. I'm Kate. I use she, her pronouns. I would love to just get the 4 of your names, what year you are, whether or not you've had the chance to visit Wes, and what high school you go to, and your pronouns if you'd like to. I guess I'll start with, oh, nope, I have an eager. Oh, it's so good. Yeah.
My name is Maya. I'm a senior. I go to Appoquinimink High School.
Which one?
Appoquinimink High School.
Okay.
Yeah. I've never gotten the chance to visit Wesleyan.
Okay.
But I would like to.
Okay.
And then the last question you said pronouns, right?
Yeah.
She, her.
Okay, cool.
Oh, I'm Haven. I go to Del Castle.
Okay.
I'm in 11th grade. I've never actually visited your school, but I want to.
That's totally fine.
And she, her?
Cool.
I don't know the pronoun. Okay.
We can talk about that too.
I'm Justin. I go to Delaware High School.
Okay.
I'm a senior, and I haven't been able to visit yet.
That's okay.
I'm a him.
Okay. And you came all the way from Dover?
Yeah, I'm from Dover.
Wow. That's a lot. I mean, I guess the state isn't all that big, but it's a far drive.
Yeah, it's an hour drive.
Oh man, thanks for making the trip.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jason. I go to Williamson High School. I'm a senior, and I haven't had a chance to visit Wesleyan.
That's okay.
And I'm a him.
Okay. So basically, the reason that I asked pronouns and that whole sort of concept is this idea of like not assuming someone's identity based on how they look or how they dress. And it's just sort of, especially for people that are trans or are non-binary, which is sort of identifying not as either male or female, which is this way longer concept that could be a whole other presentation, but basically I asked just out of respect. But yeah, that's sort of what that is all about. So some of you are juniors, some of you are seniors. What do you know about, what comes to mind when you think of Wesleyan? Yeah, go for it.
4-year private school.
4-year private school?
I'm thinking about going to a private school.
Okay. Yeah?
I think of liberal arts and just critical thinking.
Liberal arts, critical thinking, I like that. Okay.
Yeah, like a small liberal arts college.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I don't want to take their ideas, but
Yeah, no.
all everything I said.
Yeah.
Small liberal arts college, private.
Yeah.
In Connecticut.
Absolutely. So yeah, you're all right? Wesleyan is the small liberal arts college in Middletown, Connecticut. So we're probably like 4 or 5 hours on the train, depending on if the train's running on time, which I feel like it never is. I just took the train on Sunday down to this area, and it was definitely not running on time. But really, it is an easy it's easy to get up to campus, which is really nice, I think, from this area as well. But also far enough away that it's just a different vibe, I would say. But we've got about 2,900 undergraduates on campus. That is a little bit of a larger liberal arts college, right? When you think of liberal arts, often it's, 1,500 to 2,000 students. So being closer to 3,000 undergrads is very intentional, right? We want students to come in and have this opportunity to learn from lots of different types of students and sort of gain perspectives from their peers, right? We don't want you to come in and just be surrounded by people who have the exact same experience as you, right? We want the learning opportunity. It also means that you aren't going to know every single person in your graduating class, in the first 2 weeks, which I think is nice. You have a little bit more anonymity and this ability to sort of redefine who you are and what's important to you sort of over your time at Wes. In terms of the liberal arts, I think that you're right. We are a liberal arts college, and what that means is that we don't offer those pre-professional programs, right? So you really have this opportunity to come in and study literature and history and biology and neuroscience and gender studies and economics and all of these things, and really gain a lot of different perspectives from those different courses. And whatever you choose to major in, it's going to be informed by the other classes that you take outside of your major, right? Because you can't study economics in a vacuum without understanding politics or understanding a historical context or a social context, right? And so we really want you to come in and take advantage sort of the breadth of the curriculum, right? So one of the ways that we really encourage you to do that is actually through an open curriculum. So there's no set of specific courses that you'll need to take to graduate on time from Wesleyan. You really do have the opportunity to just take the classes that are interesting to you. And we encourage you to get outside of your comfort zone a little bit, but we don't require you to take a certain number of English classes or a certain number of math classes to receive your diploma. You can decide over your 4 years what is the right fit for you. I think that can also be a little bit overwhelming though, right? Coming in and having us say, here's 1,000 courses, choose 4, right? Especially if you're coming from a high school where it's sort of regimented and sort of strict in terms of what you can or can't take. So there are a lot of ways that we help you navigate that open curriculum, right? So the first is that you're going to receive an advisor, and that's someone that's going to meet with you during orientation and during your first couple weeks on campus to help you plan your classes and what your goals are. Talk to you about why you chose Wesleyan, why it's the right fit for you, and what you're hoping to get out of the next 4 years. One of my favorite stories is of this student, Allison, who came in, knew she wanted to study English, had sort of always had this thought, and her professor looked at her and said, well, you can't take all 4 English classes in your first semester, right? And she said, okay, well, what do I take then? And he said, well, what was the one course that you saw in the course catalog that scared you? And I think she said like a South Asian singing class. And she ended up, he said, okay, great, I'm registering you for that class, right? And she said it was just a totally different learning style, right? It got me completely out of my comfort zone, learning something that I had never even explored before. And she said it ended up being one of my favorite classes I ever took on campus just because it was so different than any learning I'd done previously. And so I think your advisor will be really helpful in that. But then we also have the general education expectations. So that's 3 courses in the humanities and arts, 3 courses in the social and behavioral sciences, and 3 courses in natural science and math over your 4 years. 2 in each of those sort of divisions in the first 2 years, and then 1 more in your second 2 years at Wesleyan. Those aren't required, so only about 80% of students do meet the general education expectations, but what you'll find is that can provide some structure when there feels like just a lot of options, right? But I think what's nice about WES is that it means that, and about the open curriculum specifically, is that you aren't going to be sitting in a classroom where someone's only there to meet a requirement, right? Because we've all sat in that class where there are kids who are clearly there just because they have to be and aren't interested in the subject and don't participate in the discussion. And I think what you'll find at WES is that students, even if it's their first religion class ever, are there because they're interested in the subject and they're interested in the topic. And they're able to engage with students that are, in their 6th philosophy class or 6th religion class and are just as excited to be there, right? Which I think can feel really exciting, especially if you're coming from a high school that has that sort of variety of students, that some are really, like you guys, high-powered, sort of engaged and really interested, and then others that just are there because they're told they have to be, right? But what questions can I sort of answer about the curriculum or about sort of the liberal arts sort of focus? Yeah?
So you said you get an advisor, so is that advisor with you your 4 years you're there, or just when you start, or you get an advisor every year?
That's a good question. So we have sort of a triangular advising system. So the first tier is your class dean. That's someone that is going to stick with you all 4 years. It's a part of the administration. You might get to know that person really, really well over your 4 years. Some students really utilize that person pretty specifically. There's someone that has a pulse on a lot of different areas of campus and can be helpful in coordinating with all of your professors for different things. But then you'll also have a pre-major advisor, and that person is going to stick with you from the summer before you matriculate all the way until you declare your major. And then you'll receive a faculty advisor within your department. And if you choose to double major, which about 40% of Wesleyan students do choose to double major, you get an advisor in both majors. So, yeah.
And you're talking about declaring majors. Do you don't have to declare a major as soon as you get in? Is there like a waiting period?
Yeah, we actually recommend that most students don't declare their major until the end of their sophomore year, because we want you to come in and at least wait a full year and take at least 8 classes and figure out sort of what is the right fit for you. Some students choose to declare earlier, some don't declare really until the end of the sophomore year. We do have a couple of programs on campus where you need to know by the end of your first year. So one of those is the College of Social Studies, so that's history, economics, politics, and social and critical theory, but it's based on this cohort model. So you study with the same 10 students in your classes for all of your sophomore year. You take all the same classes, you read the same things, you study the same books, and you don't receive any grades. Basically what you're doing is sort of building this baseline of knowledge and sort of understanding in a subject, and then you go out and take all these other courses in your junior year, but you always have one class with the same students. It's very writing based, very reading intensive, and then that's true also in the College of Letters, which is history, literature, philosophy from antiquity to the present. Again, that's sort of a 3-year program, so you have to know by the end of your first year. Students either come in knowing that they're interested in the College of Letters or the College of Social Studies, or figure it out pretty quickly to be able to declare by the end of their first year, but you can still double major and things like that. So I forgot to mention the third tier of advising though, and that's peer advising. So peer advisors, we have about 10 or so peer advisors on campus. They're students that go through actually a very rigorous training process to be mentors in terms of study skills, time management skills, sort of building on the things that you're probably getting through DCS, right? Helping you sort of navigate the curriculum at Wesleyan and also the social life, right? Because you're gonna have so much more free time, and figuring out how to balance that with the classes and what you need to get done. Those peer advisors can be super duper helpful with that. So. Other questions? Yeah.
It's a question about the questions. Does it have to be just about like academics or?
No, it can be about anything. Yeah.
So like this program is like centered around like first generational students.
Yeah.
Not all of us, but like most of us are. So what resources would you say Wesleyan has for first generation students?
Yeah.
To like, make it like an easier process for us to adjust to like college life?
That's a great question. So in the incoming class this past year, we had, I think about 15% of the student body coming in was first generation to college. And about 3 years ago, we actually piloted a first generation to college orientation. So in addition to the regular orientation program, first generation students could come to campus a couple days earlier, do more specialized programming with other first generation students that are, sophomores, juniors, and seniors that wanted to assist other first generation students who are coming into the college. Just finished the 3rd year of the pilot. It's not big enough yet, and it doesn't have enough resources yet to bring every single first generation student to the pilot program, but is something that we are continuing to expand over the 4 years, right? But I think, and have expanded over the last 3 years, and then I think are continuing to grow and hope to build. But I think to talk sort of more broadly about sort of that idea of diversity, how do you bring students to campus, because we're a predominantly white institution, right? We were founded to educate affluent white men, right? And so I think that Wesleyan and a lot of our peer institutions have to do a lot of work to make any type of historically underrepresented student on our campus feel like it's their space too, right? And I can come in and say like, oh, we want a diverse campus, and we want all these different perspectives on our campus. I think unless you're doing the accessibility work, right, to make that campus more inclusive, right? So we see, we read holistically. So when I'm reading your application, I'm looking at you within the context of the opportunities that have been available to you, the curriculum available in your high school, understanding what your parents do for work, how many siblings you have, what community you're coming from, to understand like what does that mean sort of within the context of sort of your preparation for Wesleyan, and understanding that it's going to look very different for a first generation student who's in a public high school to come to Wesleyan versus like, not to pick on another school here in Delaware, but like St. Andrew's School, for example, which is a great institution, right? But costs a lot of money every year, and yeah, they give financial aid to students and all of that, but it's just a very different educational experience, right? And different community living experience. So I think we're thinking very sort of critically about like, what are we already doing well to support students, but then also where do we still have work to do, right? And so that happens in a lot of different ways. So that first generation college orientation is one. It's run in partnership with our first generation to college student group on campus. So we have about 280 clubs and organizations on campus that are either interest-based or identity-based. And one of those groups is our first generation student group. And they do just a lot of like building community and figuring out sort of advocacy for first generation to college students, but then they're also working, in conjunction with like Invisible Men, which is our Men of Color group on campus, and sort of these other sort of intersecting identities as well. So, one of the things that happened last year, we had a new resource center open. It's really the result of about 15 years of student activism on campus that said, okay, we still have historically underrepresented students on this campus that don't feel like it's theirs yet, right? And how do we bring in more lecturers, more speakers, do workshops, basically provide resources to students that aren't underrepresented on campus, but really for first generation college students, low income students, students of color, queer and trans students, learning disabled students, physically disabled students, all of the above, really thinking about providing just a physical space, right, with like couches and places to hang out, right, that feel like it's your own space, but then also, providing more programming and receiving institutional funding, right? And I think that's the key part, right? It's not a student organization, which, yes, receives money from the Student Government Association. This is actually a space that is funded by the administration, but then is run by a director and, about 40 student interns. So last year when it started, we hired this director, Demetrius Colvin, who's, number one, just great. But he didn't do any new programming last year. So he spent the entire year observing campus, observing the community, saying, okay, where are the holes? Where can we make this space more accessible? And then also, what lectures do we need to be bringing to campus, and what do students want to see? And so now they're starting to do programming, but I think it was really smart for him to come in and say, all right, let's not just sort of like upheave everything that we've already done, but say, all right, how can we build on the good work we're already doing? So I think, again, Wesleyan's not perfect, but at the end of the day, I really do think that we walk the walk and talk the talk in terms of talking about what it means to be a student on Wesleyan's campus, and being a place that's pretty honest with ourselves, right? And I think I couldn't work at a place that didn't do that, right? So I think that's a great question. So, yeah.
Can you elaborate on the engineering program with Columbia?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the 3-2 program. So basically you spend 3 years at Wesleyan getting a degree in basically whatever you'd like, typically a science field, working with professors that are advisors for the 3-2 program as well. And then after your junior year, or during your junior year, you apply to Columbia. There's also Caltech and Dartmouth are options with that. The most popular is Columbia. And then you'll spend 2 years there receiving an engineering degree. So 5 years, 2 bachelor's degrees.
Mm-hmm. So do you have to have like a certain GPA to enter the program? Like what is like the acceptance rate of it?
Yeah, I don't know the acceptance rate exactly, just because it varies from year to year how many students we're sending to the program. I would say a lot of students are really interested in it before they get to Wesleyan, and then realize once they get to us that they don't want to leave after their junior year, and so we'll find other ways to explore engineering after they've graduated. But in terms of GPA, I know with the Columbia program, if you do have a certain GPA, which I don't know exactly what it is, and take certain prerequisite classes, you're actually automatically accepted to their program. So that's why the Columbia program is the most popular of those, but is definitely something to look more at on our website, because I know they have sort of a very specific list.
I saw like the courses for like every single like mechanical, civil.
Yes.
How like the West courses and the Columbia courses matched. Yeah.
So you know more than I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that is popular in addition to that 3-2 program is Wesleyan's 4-1 program. So in addition to being a liberal arts college, we're also a research university. So we have about 200 graduate students on campus, mostly in the natural sciences and math. That includes psychology, but we also have a PhD program in ethnomusicology, which is basically the study of cultures through music, and studying music through culture as well. So basically, if you're doing research as an undergraduate, which is pretty common because we're eligible for graduate level funding, we're conducting graduate level research, we don't have nearly enough students to actually, like grad students, to actually fill all of those programs. Now we're seeing now sort of you're able to do that research as an undergrad. And then if you're doing that research in a program where we offer a master's degree, you can actually apply to that master's degree in your senior year and stay for a 5th year free at Wesleyan and receive an accelerated master's degree. So in like biology, psychology, neuroscience, chemistry, any of those programs, you can stay and receive your associate or your master's degree. So, yeah.
We're talking about like the School of Letters and the School of Social Studies. So like, what other schools do you guys have? And then also, is it like if you like take UPenn, like you apply to like Wharton School of Business? Would you like?
Yeah, no, it's not like that. So you don't have to know at the point of application. You just fill out the one application to Wesleyan and you're admitted. And then once you're there, that's when you would choose one of these colleges. I have to tell you, they were clearly named by professors that don't have to talk about them to students, because colleges makes it sound like you have to apply within a university. It's not the case. You have to apply to the major once you're at Wesleyan. So the College of Social Studies and the College of Letters, then there's also the College of Integrative Sciences, which is a really research-focused science program. It doesn't work exactly the same way in terms of the cohort model and the 3 years and all of that, but you do have sort of more of a focus on research within the sciences and sort of integrating biology and chemistry, neuroscience and bio, things like that. But the professor who developed that college her name's Ashita Mukherjee. She's amazing. So that's one of the others. The College of Film and the Moving Image, often just called the film major. That's another one that you have to apply to, but that is in the 2nd semester of your sophomore year. So, yeah.
So how is the environment in Middletown, Connecticut? How does that affect the school?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Middletown really is a city of about 50,000 people. It was founded prior to the founding of Wesleyan. So I don't know what the population is here in Wilmington, but I think it's probably more populated than Middletown. But it's not sort of middle of nowhere, 2,000 people that are only there to like run the pharmacy that the students go to, right, for like Red Bull on the weekends. No, I think it's like there were industries that were established prior to the founding of Middletown. So you have a lot of Middletown residents that aren't connected to the university, which I think makes for a more symbiotic relationship between the university and the town. I think, again, it's something that we think really critically about in terms of like, we bring students to campus for 7 months out of the 12-month year. What does that mean for us to engage in sustainable ways, right? Because we don't want to come in and be like, here, we're going to do all of this community service, and then we're going to leave for the whole summer for like 3 or 4 months. Good luck, see you. We didn't think about it. And so I use the term engagement really specifically because it isn't community service, right? We have just as much to learn from the Middletown community as we have to offer, right? So from all of the lectures, performances, speakers, dancers that come to campus, musicians that come to campus, those are usually open to the entire Middletown community. So like our Monday night lecture series in the Center for the Humanities is open to anyone from Middletown that wants to come and sit in on a lecture on Monday night. Then our film series that runs Wednesday through Saturday nights. So it's free every night except Friday nights when it's $5, but it's everything from like Philadelphia, which is a classic black and white film, to they showed Moana in 3D last year. I know, me too, I love Moana. And then they had Moonlight before it was in theaters because we have a West alum that worked on the production of that film. So that will bring like families to campus for those types of evenings. But then in terms of like Middletown itself, Main Street is only 3 blocks from campus. It has over 40 restaurants on that one street. Most of them are independently owned. So I think the only 2 chains on that street, one is a Dunkin' Donuts. And when you come to the Northeast, you're gonna find that there's a Dunkin' Donuts on every corner ever in existence. There are 3 Dunkin' Donuts on my drive to work, which is nuts. I only live 10 minutes from the office. And then the other one is like a froyo place, but like there's independently owned like Thai food, Vietnamese food. There's really, really good pho on just on Main Street. What else? Really good burgers. One of the things you'll find about Central Connecticut, this is a weird thing because I'm not from Central Connecticut, they do this thing called steamed cheeseburgers, which you think would be really, really bad, right? Because like grilling a burger is what you should do. They're actually pretty good, but there's a sort of classic diner in town that has steamed cheeseburgers, and they have this like very specific steamer for the burger. That's a whole other conversation, but they also have like bananas foster French toast and stuff like that. So it's easy for students to get off campus a little bit. There are a couple of bars in town and stuff like that for students of age to like get off campus a little bit. Usually I think Wednesday night is bar night, which is how you know they're all college students and not adults yet. But you know, I think in terms of like just stuff to do off campus, there is stuff happening off campus. You know, our outing club will get off campus for skiing in the area, hiking, biking. You can rent sleds from them in the winter to sled on campus when it's snowing. And they do different outings to like go apple picking in the area and do the corn maze at the orchard that's down the street. So, you know, there's stuff to do off campus. I would say what you'll find is that the majority of students stay on campus all the time. You know, or they get off campus to like grab a bagel and then come back. Because we have over 280 clubs and organizations, everything from, you know, 29 varsity sports to club and intramural sports teams to a theater group called Second Stage. They're putting on upwards of 12 shows every semester. We only have 14 weeks in a semester, so you can imagine just how busy you can be going to theater performance, let alone being in them. You know, and then there's also, you know, being halfway between New York and Boston, we're only about 2 hours from each city. A lot of performers and musicians will come to Wes. We bring over 300 performers to campus every year, and those are usually like very reasonably priced, like $6 for a show or $5 for a show, if there's a cost at all. So, yeah.
So could you elaborate on the study abroad program? Like how long does it last? Like does it cost like extra? Like
yeah, that's a good question. So Wesleyan has 3 of its own study abroad programs, one in Madrid, one in Paris, and one in Bologna, Italy. And that's in addition to about 150 approved programs. So because we don't have, you know, we're a small liberal arts college, we don't have sort of the resources to have all of our own programs everywhere. We've basically gone through and partnered with other universities and also with third-party programs to have these approved programs. So what that means is that you will basically be getting the Wesleyan education while you're abroad, whether it be sort of studying at an international university and living with a host family, or you know, conducting research in 3 cities over the course of the year or the semester. You know, your financial aid will travel with you, so whatever you're paying to go to Wesleyan is what you'll pay to go abroad, and your credits will transfer back. So you don't have to worry about sort of graduating in 4 years still and all of that stuff. And that's true if you go abroad for a year, if you go for a semester, if you go over the summer. We also have professors that are starting to do January term study abroad. So what you'll find is that colleges have this really weird thing where you have a 2-week winter break and then 3 weeks in January before you start classes after MLK Day, which is just like 5 weeks to do whatever you want. Students, so professors, there was one professor who took a group down to Santiago, Chile, to go to a theater festival down there that was an international street theater festival, and it was a class, right? So you got a full credit for this class, but you were in class like 6 hours a day for 2 weeks, but it was going to these theater performances all over Santiago and, you know, discussing those with the professor as well. So, yes?
I have a question from the live stream.
Okay.
Could you talk about the percentage of students that gain acceptance into medical school?
Yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, I don't know the exact percentage. It changes from year to year. What I will say is that a lot of schools will tell you, oh, it's 100% med school acceptance rate. And then they have this like really cute little asterisk. And when you read the fine print, it says something like of qualified students. And that means a certain GPA and a certain prerequisite courses and students that the school has basically agreed to support. Wesleyan doesn't do that. We support any student that's going through the medical school process, so we don't have a 100% acceptance rate. That being said, we do have a pre-med advisor who works with any student that does want to go into the medical field, helping with MCAT prep. They'll also do pre-nursing, pre-dental, all of those sorts of things. They'll help you write your essays, find people to write recommendation letters. They help you with that whole process. And that's true even if you decide to go to medical school after you've graduated from Wesleyan. So the benefit of our Career Center is that once you come to Wesleyan, that never leaves you. So even if you graduated 15 years ago and you've now decided to go back to medical school, you can still come back and use that resource as well. But the pre-med advisor is really wonderful in that sense. So, yeah.
You said that you guys are like roughly like 2 hours away from New York and Boston.
Yeah.
So what would that mean for somebody who wants to like do internships and like get out in the more like city area? Like what kind of like opportunities would West provide for students like that?
Yeah, so most of the time when students want to do internships, they're not doing them during the school year, they're doing them over the summer. We do have students that will intern in Hartford or New Haven, which are only about 20 to 30 minutes depending on traffic from campus each, and are both the capital and largest city. I think New Haven's the largest city. Someone should fact check me on that. But you have this opportunity to get off campus and go there if you'd like to, and transportation to both those cities was made easier actually this summer because now we have a commuter rail line that's only about 15 minutes from campus. And it'll take you to either of those cities, and it's only a couple dollars to ride, which is awesome, and I'm really excited about, because if you've ever driven on 91 in the state of Connecticut, it's the worst ever. Then sort of in terms of just how the Career Center helps you find those opportunities. So our Career Center partners with a program called Handshake, which is a partnership with about 31 other colleges. And we share all of our job listings. So any job that gets listed at one of these 31 other colleges gets posted at Wesleyan as well. And so you're really able to have this opportunity to look through all of these job postings. And you can meet with a career advisor to sort of help you do that. They're going to help you with your resumes, your cover letters, internship applications. But we have this great program with our alumni called Cardinal Internships. So we have Wesleyan alums who basically have said, okay, we need interns or research assistants in our organizations or companies. And so we're going to set aside those spots only for Wesleyan students. So basically it takes down the competition from every student at the 5,000 colleges and universities here in the States and just takes it down to Wesleyan students. So you have this opportunity to really, have someone that knows the education that you're getting. And so for someone who's, really interested in economic consulting, for example, so Nikita had done physics for like 2 years at Wesleyan and then took an econ class and was like, I am going to do economic consulting. She had no experience with this sort of before. She was actually able to find an alum who had been a physics major at Wesleyan but now works in economic consulting. And so she was able to, really, I think, she was able to work with that person and sort of receive mentorship from that person as well. So, yeah. And I will say also Wesleyan does offer grants. So if you want to do an internship that's low paid or unpaid, you can receive up to $5,000 for a summer experience grant. And that can go towards, a plane ticket to get to San Francisco for the internship or for housing or any of those things. Do you want to move so you're not right in the sun?
That's fine. I actually have a question too.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the anthropology program and the possible internships that the department has?
That's a good question. I don't know a ton about the anthropology department except that I have students that are majors in anthropology. It really sort of spans the gamut between students that are interested in sort of the more medical side and, focus in on, the public health and how health functions within different communities to students that are interested in the dance side of anthropology. So all I can say is that it's a great department and I'd be happy to put you in touch with one of those students. But in terms of, opportunities to study abroad, so someone like Sarah Osborne, she is a senior right now. Her majors are neuroscience and religion. So she's a science and society program major, but so sort of related to anthropology. She's taken a lot of anthropology courses. The study abroad program she did was studying women's and maternal health in indigenous communities. And so she went to India, South Africa, and Brazil over the course of one semester, living in these communities, having translators, and doing these qualitative interviews that sort of led to a final research paper and sort of capstone of that project. And now in her senior year, I believe she's pursuing a thesis. Students often say they're pursuing, and the reason I say I believe is because students stop their thesis like halfway through the semester sometimes. So I'm pretty sure she's doing a thesis. But I'd be happy to put you in touch with a student that's doing research in the anthropology department. So, hi.
I don't know if you guys already talked about this.
That's
but
okay.
Could you tell me a little bit about the 3-2 programs that you guys have for?
Yeah, absolutely. So I chatted a little bit about this, but basically what you would do is you'd come in and spend 3 years at Wesleyan, typically in a STEM field, and meeting these prerequisite classes to apply then in your junior year to Columbia, Caltech, or Dartmouth. And typically it's Columbia because with their program we sort of have an agreement that if you take these prerequisite courses and get a certain GPA and then apply, you're pretty much automatically accepted. That's not always the case, but it's pretty much the case. And then you'd spend 2 years receiving your another bachelor's degree in engineering at one of those schools. There's a lot of information on the website of sort of the specific classes, how it works, and the advisors within that department are really fantastic because you'd work with them in addition to your sort of regular academic advisor to make sure that you've met those sort of pre-engineering program components. I will also say though that Wesleyan does offer an engineering minor. So if you come in and decide that you don't want to leave after your junior year, you can stay and, if you're a physics major, for example, have an engineering minor that's informing a lot of the classes that you're taking as a physics major. And then a lot of students will go on to do engineering at the graduate level. 85% of our graduates are receiving a grad degree within 10 years of graduation. So it's pretty common that students will go on to some sort of specialized master's program.
If I wanted to do biomedical engineering, what major would I do at Wesleyan?
I mean, you could be a biology major and do an engineering minor. That's a good question. I think it would depend on sort of what your focus was within biomedical sort of engineering. You could also, study science and society, for example, which sort of requires you to have both a natural science focus and a social science focus and sort of think about more broadly. I know there's a class within the Science and Society program called Anti-Psychiatry, which basically focuses on the over-prescription of drugs within the United States and thinking about what that's doing sort of as a society. So a lot of students will major in Science and Society as pre-med students because they're interested in that sort of social context to the medical side of what they're interested in. So you really could major in anything. I say this to students all the time, but you could be pre-med and be an English major at Wesleyan and still be prepared to go on to medical school. So you aren't sort of pigeonholed into this one very specific area.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Yeah.
So how are the dorms? Are there certain dorms where there's only one major, or do most people live on campus?
That's a good question. That's a great question. So Wesleyan actually requires students to live on campus all 4 years. There are very few exceptions to that, but I actually think our housing model is awesome, and I wish I could go back and go to Wesleyan because I'm not a West grad, and the houses for the seniors are so much nicer than where I live right now. So basically, in your first year, you're going to live in a residence hall. So that's typically with a roommate, sometimes with two. Don't ask Res Life right now about that because we're over-enrolled for the year and they're blaming us. So there means that there are a couple more triples than there usually be on campus. But it's because so many students wanted to come to Wes, which is great. So basically, in your first year, you're trying to spend sort of time with other first-year students, right in the center of campus, close to all of the academic buildings, close to the dining hall, sort of just immersing yourself in that community. Then in your sophomore year, you can choose to stay in a dorm, or you can move into program housing. So program housing, we have about 35 program houses on campus. That's everything from identity-based housing to interest-based housing. So things like the Bayit, which is our Jewish house on campus, to Women of Color House, to Full House, which is probably Malcolm X house. Were you a Malcolm X house? Very nice. So the Full House is probably my favorite. It's not based on the 90s television show, but it's all about eating food and feeling full together. So they have 4 refrigerators in this house. It's unbelievable. And they like to cook, and that's sort of the sort of part of the house. Then there's Farmhouse, which is all the students that live in that house work on our on-campus organic farm and are interested in sustainable agriculture and things like that. ASL house, that's American Sign Language House. Students don't have to know sign language to live in that house, but you have to be interested in sort of programming around ASL and the deaf community. What's great about program housing is that it's mostly sophomores and juniors, and so you actually are planning events for your house, but those events, you will also have to host events that are open to the entire Wesleyan community. So you have this opportunity to really come in and get involved in program housing and involved in the events and things like that without necessarily needing to live in that house. But that's 6 to 20 students to a house. You don't always get your first choice the first go around, but by your junior year, you definitely will pretty much get the house that you would like. But mostly students self-select into the houses that they're interested in, right? Then in your junior year, you can either choose to stay in program housing or move into on-campus apartments, so high-rise and low-rise. We're really inventive with names. One is a short building and one's a tall building. So they're 2- and 4-person apartments. You have your own kitchen. You can start cooking for yourself a little bit more, have that opportunity to just have a little bit more space to yourself. And then in your senior year, we actually have the majority of our seniors living in wood frame houses that are owned by the university. So these are 2- to 6-person houses. They are nice. And you get your own bedroom with a full-size bed to yourself. You share a bathroom, you share a kitchen, living space, but you have to take out your trash on trash night. You have to clean your own bathroom. You have to clean your kitchen and do your dishes and manage having roommates. And one of the cool things to me about this whole housing system is that it's encouraging you to be engaging in your community in different ways and not only teaching you how to be a good academic, but also a good community member, right? So there are loud streets, which are sort of houses that are all Wesleyan students. They're loud because they're the ones that are known for throwing the on-campus parties. And then quiet streets are ones where there are also Middletown residents living on those streets. So they might not necessarily be connected to the university. So you have to get to know your neighbors, and that luau that you want to throw on a Wednesday night is probably not going to fly with a 6-year-old that's got to get on the bus, right, on Thursday morning. So you have to navigate that relationship. And so it's sort of teaching you how to live within a community. But it also means that if a pipe bursts or it snows and something needs to be shoveled, they're going to take care of that for you. And Wesleyan sort of is there immediately, and you don't have to deal with like landlords that aren't interested in paying attention to you. So I think any Wesleyan student will tell you that the senior housing on campus is like 100% the reason to come to Wesleyan. One of my favorite stories, I guess it was a year and a half ago now, a group of students, the thermostat in their house broke and Wesleyan replaced it with a Nest. You guys know what a Nest is? It's the thermostat that you can control from your phone. It's like smartphone enabled. So ridiculous. But basically they were thinking about like sustainability, right? Because then if you know that no one's home, you can turn down the temperature without having to go home to do it, right? So yeah, they're saving energy, but also way nicer than where I'm currently living. And a lot of Wesleyan students will say that like right after they graduate, their housing is not as nice as it was when they were a senior. So yeah.
So how easy or hard is it to change majors? Really
easy. Depending on the major. So if you're going to move from biology to studio art at the end of your junior year, you're going to be pretty strapped for time in your senior year, right? Trying to get all those sort of art classes in. But so take, for example, Devonair. He just graduated from us this past year with a degree in American Studies and Government. He was a double major. He came in, started as a bio and pre-med major. He then found neuroscience, and so then was neuroscience and pre-med track. Then he found the College of Letters, started in the College of Letters in his sophomore year, and then found that American Studies component. And then in his junior year, figured out that he didn't want to do the College of Letters anymore and picked up a government major in addition to that American Studies major and was still able to graduate on time. He studied abroad, he did research, he's gainfully employed at this point. So, you have this opportunity, I think, really to come in and figure out what is the right fit for you. So, and your advisor is going to help you with that. And what I will also say is, like, especially if you move from something like American Studies to government, you're going to have some classes that you took in American Studies that are going to count in government as well. So, yeah. Are there other questions from the live stream? Okay. Anything else that you guys want to know? Okay, I'll talk a little bit about admission and financial aid. So Wes, we are a Common App school, also a coalition application school. I don't know if University of Delaware is coalition yet. Okay. Yeah, so you could apply coalition. It's basically the same thing as the Common App, but not as old. Unfortunately, for some reason, they chose the exact same letters, which makes it super confusing because you always wanted to put CA for Common App on things, and now that could mean multiple things. Anyway, we accept those in Early Decision 1, which is a November 15th deadline, and then Early Decision 2, which is a January 1st deadline, and then January 1st is also our regular decision deadline. There's no real difference in applying ED1 or ED2. It's just a month and a half. So you have a little bit more time to tell us that Wesleyan is your first choice. So with that being said, ED is binding, so you're saying that if you get accepted, you will attend. I think a lot of students get nervous about applying ED because they feel like they aren't going to get the same financial aid package that they'd get in regular decision. That's not true at Wesleyan. We're meeting 100% of demonstrated need for all admitted students. So what that means is that we aren't going to gap you. Are you guys familiar with what financial aid gapping is? Okay, so you'll probably get to this point, but basically gapping is, let's say it costs, for round numbers sake, $70,000 a year to come to West, which is pretty close. Let's say your family can afford to, put $10,000 a year towards your tuition. That means you still need $60,000 a year to come to Wesleyan. Schools that gap you will give you $40,000 and say come up with the other 20. In my life experience, it's really hard to come up with $20,000, right? Or to take out loans for that amount in addition to loans you already were going to be packaged with that $40,000. So Wesleyan says we'll get you to that full $60,000 with grants, loans, and work study. We cap loans at $19,000 total over your entire 4 years. So you really, I think it's a manageable student debt. And then if your family's making between $60,000 and $90,000 a year, we actually will do a reduced loan package. And for families making under $60,000 a year, we actually guarantee that you'll graduate with no loans. So we do try to make it financially feasible for families. So no matter if you're applying ED1, ED2, or regular, you'll receive that financial aid package as well. We're also test optional, so we don't require the submission of standardized testing at the point of application. You might be looking at some other schools like Wesleyan. I love that face. That's like my favorite reaction to that because I'm not a good test taker, right? So why should one 4-hour test on one Saturday of your life determine everything that's coming after, right? Yeah, there it is. Okay, so there are also a lot of things that are outside of your control that impact your ability to be successful in standardized testing, right? There's so much research that shows that your parents' education level, their income, the high school that you go to, your gender, your race, all of these things, whether or not you have a learning disability, impacts your ability to be successful on standardized testing. And then you compound any of those identities on top of each other and it makes it even harder, right? So we want to give you the option to decide whether or not that test is a good indicator of who you are as a student and how you've spent the last 4 or 5 years preparing to come to a place like Wesleyan. What I will say is if you choose not to submit your scores, I'm just going to assume you didn't take the test. So there is nothing, it's not going to hurt your application. It's not seen as a negative. It's not going to take points away or anything like that from your application if you choose not to submit your scores. If you do send them, I have to look at them. So that can hurt you. So I would say definitely talk to your college counselors and figure out where are your scores within our context and what does that mean sort of more broadly. But yeah, cool. All right. There's nothing else. This is awesome. Thank you guys. Oh, yeah.
You were saying you look at the application holistically?
Yeah.
So is it something that you, in your experience, when you see something, you're like, okay, it's not just a transcript, it's what they do extracurricularly or
Yeah. So I'm the one who will actually read your application. So first thing I look at is your transcript, but I can't look at your transcript in a vacuum, right? I look at your transcript, I look at what classes are available in your high school. I look at, because your school will basically send me all this information about the classes that are available in your high school and, how they're weighting those on your transcript. So typically I'm looking to see that you've taken the most rigorous classes that are available in your high school, whether that be an IB program or an AP program or an honors program, a dual enrollment program. I'm looking to see what have you taken advantage of, and have you been successful in it. But then I'm also looking and saying, okay, how far do you travel to get to school every day? What do your parents do for work? How many siblings do you have? Trying to get a sense of like, where are you coming from, right? Like, looks really different for a kid to come from Wilmington, Delaware than it does from like Walla Walla, Washington, which I also read for. So, you know, that life experience is really different, and it's why I come and visit and talk to all of you, and also just like drive around the community and try not to seem creepy, but basically just try to get a sense of like, what is life like here, right? And that's why I come and visit your high schools, is why I come and visit your CBOs and stuff like that. And so then I'm looking at sort of that co-curricular list and seeing like, what is important to you? What do you spend the majority of your time outside of class doing? If you need to be home after school to take care of a sibling, or if you need to be, work part-time or full-time, that is just as great as being president of the Model UN. And I see it the same way, because, you don't have control over that, right? And so, and also, do you need to be home after school because, that is what's expected, and there's no one to drive you home if you stay an hour after school for Model UN, right, or debate team. So, I look into those things, and I want you to tell me those things. And then I'm reading your essay, right, and I'm getting a sense of like, what is your written ability? Again, reading in context. Is English your first language? What is the level of English instruction you've been able to have? For some students, it's, did you write your own essay? Because I talked to a college counselor even today who was like, I know kids that have hired people to write their essays for them, which is wild to me, right? And I can tell, which is kind of crazy. So I sort of look through the nuance of your application and really try to get a sense. And, your college counselors, your guidance counselor, your teachers are all going to send recommendation letters also, and that gives me a sense of like who you are within the context of your classrooms and in your community, and what's important to you there as well. Yes?
Just to follow up on that point, can you talk a little bit about the recommendation? Simply because some of the schools, the counselors may not necessarily know the students
Yeah,
that well.
that's
So
totally
how does
fine.
that impact the process?
Yeah, so the average caseload for a college counselor or guidance counselor here in the United States is over 450 students, as I'm sure some of you might be experiencing even in your own high schools. So I have college counselors or guidance counselors every year that don't send a recommendation letter. That's totally fine. It's not going to hurt your application if they don't send me anything, or if they, tell me they're the one counselor for the entire high school and they wrote, a paragraph on you. I'm going to look at your recommendation letters for these guys as well, which is almost more important because you get to know them more personally and things like that. I would say in the case that your college counselor or guidance counselor doesn't know you really well, choose teachers that do know you really well. Again, it's not a perfect system, right? But don't choose your AP Calc teacher in your senior year who's only known you for 3 weeks because you think, oh, that's the hardest class I've taken yet. Unless that teacher also had you in your junior year and sophomore year, they don't know you at all. So, think about choosing teachers not only in the classes where you've been the most successful and it feels like it's easy, but also those classes where you feel like, I had to work so hard because that first test came around and I got a C- and I had to work my way up to that A-, and that was the hardest work I've done. I spent all this time with the teacher, over lunch and after school. That teacher knows your work ethic. And can really speak to the dedication that you bring to their classroom and to that subject and to things that don't come easy to you, right? So that's something to consider as well. Yeah?
So how much of a factor does early decision have?
Yeah, so it is slightly easier to get accepted to Wesleyan early decision than it is to get accepted regular decision. So if you look at our 17% acceptance rate, that's an average of both regular, which is closer probably to like a 13% acceptance rate, and then ED, which is like a 22% acceptance rate. So that is a wider gap, right? It's almost a 10 percentage point difference. But what I will say is if you are not ready to commit to Wesleyan ED, don't apply regular decision, right? Because 80% of our admission offers are going out in regular decision. So you'll hear this all the time, like, oh, you fill half the class in ED. Well, yes, because every student that we admit has to come. But for those of you that apply regular decision, you're probably going to have a lot of really good options, right? And so we have to admit more students than will attend in regular decision to fill that other half the class or overfill the other half the class. So I would say if you know Wesleyan's your first choice and you're willing to make that commitment, and it's something you obviously have to talk to your parents about or your guardians about or Tony about, Dr. Lean, is that what I should call you? Okay, I can get used to that. But basically, like, talk to them about sort of if that's the right fit for you, because I think it's also nice to be done with the process as of December 15th, right? It can be a nice thing. So, yeah.
So early decision is, so you said it starts in December or November?
So early decision is a November 15th deadline, our ED1, but then we also have a January 1st ED2 deadline, and you'd find out mid-February.
So you find out if you got, so that's senior year, right?
Yeah.
So you find out before like April or something, where
Yeah.
most people start to find out if you go early decision?
Yeah. But you're required to attend the school. Yeah. And then you still have to make sure your senioritis doesn't kick in, right? Because that has happened. I have seen students where the senioritis has kicked in and you have to say, never mind, you can't come. So that's really unusual. Like that has to be like you're getting Fs. But yeah. So, yeah. All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate your time.
And do you have a card or can I forward